Welcome to Questions from the Closet. I'm Charlie Bird.
And I'm Ben Shalati. Each episode, we discuss a question we're commonly asked as LGBTQ plus Latter-day Saints.
We're not trying to answer this question or come to a consensus, but simply sharing our perspectives. Today's question is, how come all the allies are middle-aged moms?
So Charlie and I are not terribly diverse, and we share many opinions and life experiences. For example, this week we both had unexpected lunches.
Yeah, the difference was that mine was with my brother, and Ben's was with
a date.
A guy.
My gosh. I went on my first date.
How'd it go?
I don't want to talk about the content of the date because I did not ask the guy for his consent, and
Well,
I don't
we
want.
just lost all the listeners.
Well, I don't want someone to find out about how I feel about something publicly.
How did you feel before the date?
That's the thing I want to talk about. I was so nervous. I've had lunches with many people, and I was like, oh my gosh. And it was a setup, so I didn't know this guy. And I was like, I don't know what it'll be like. But I'm like, I'm really good at talking to people, so wasn't nervous about that. But this was the thing that surprised me. So the date was set up, and he lives like an hour away, which is not that far. But I was like,
Find him.
so I was like,
If you're listening.
I was like, oh my gosh, he lives too far away. We could never get married. Then I was like, what if he likes me and I don't like him and I hurt his feelings? Or maybe I have to move up to Salt Lake now. Like all these crazy thoughts were going through my head. And I was like, Ben, you know this is ridiculous, of course. I was like, yes, Ben, I know this is ridiculous. But those were the actual thoughts I had.
That's like a crash course in anxiety and using mindfulness.
Yeah, I'm like
living in the present.
I feel like I'm mature enough and smart enough to not have these thoughts, but they still came.
Yeah.
But I talked myself through them.
Did you do anything awkward on the date?
I hope not. I don't think so. I feel like I was charming and fun.
I'm gonna figure out who it is and ask. I'm just kidding. I'm proud of you. That's cool.
Thank you. But yeah, I was surprised at the amount of anxiety I felt, but it was fun.
Yeah. I didn't feel anxious at all to meet my brother for lunch today.
No.
No anxieties.
How did your lunch go?
It was great. It's good to see him.
How's Sam doing now that he's married?
He's happy.
Oh,
yeah.
Good for him. He just got back from Mexico. So fun.
All right.
Okay.
You're just...
Let's move on. Well, we would like to provide a variety of voices and perspectives. So today we're joined by Cynthia Winward.
Hello.
So Cynthia, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I think I qualify as being the middle-aged.
Are you a middle-aged mom? Who
ally.
knew?
Yeah, who knew? I know I hide it so well. I look 22. I live here in Provo. I've lived here my whole adult life now. California girl, but came to BYU, never left. So this is a good place to live, good place to raise a family, which is what my husband and I have done. We have 3 kiddos. They're all adults. We're brand new empty nesters. I'm telling you, it's all it's cracked up to be.
Oh, it's good.
Yes. After being in charge of humans my entire adulthood, I'm like, oh, yes, this is so good. So that's kind of just what brought me here to Provo, being a BYU student and stuck around, raised the family. And I'm the co-host of the At Last She Said It podcast. It's pretty much a podcast where 2 women talk about how much we love the church and also how difficult it is if you're someone concerned about equality for women. Mm-hmm. So that's me.
Yeah. How did you end up starting the podcast? At Last She Said It.
We met in an online support Facebook group where we were moderators. And so we were doing lots of talking behind the scenes, always as we vetted people, we wanted to make sure people coming into the group were actually in some type of faith transition or faith crisis, as opposed to your bishop who's I want to understand my ward family members. And we're like, no. So it was just interesting, the things that Susan and I would talk about behind the scenes with some of the other moderators. And we were like, no one's talking about such and such. And we're like, well, somebody should. Why not us? And
Was that scary to start vocally and publicly talking about things that maybe other people view as taboo?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we were really careful about not using certain words in the beginning. And then as time went on and we just got a little braver and people were responding, then we were like, okay, I think we can say a little bit more. And does that sound familiar to you too?
No.
No? Okay.
Yeah, it does.
It does.
How did you grow that bravery?
I think seeing how many women wrote us and would say a couple of things. One, I'm not crazy, because they thought they were the only ones feeling this way. Mm-hmm. Also, I thought I was the only one. So I guess that kind of goes along with I'm not crazy. And so that just kind of gave us the encouragement to just maybe there are thousands of women who feel this way. So let's go ahead and just be our true selves and just start saying a little bit more. And it's never backfired. Like, I mean, of course we get haters, just like I'm sure you two get as well. But mostly it's just people who are just so grateful that we're saying the things at last that maybe certain women have thought about their whole life, or maybe they also went through some type of faith transition where they're feeling things differently.
Can I ask more questions about this?
You can, if that's where we want to go.
I'm interested in. So how has this grown or altered your faith?
My faith in God and Jesus Christ has only gotten stronger because I feel like as church, the organization of the church got harder for me. It forced me into the scriptures for myself to say, okay, I've been told my whole life this is what this scripture means, but does it? And so like then I would start reading them on my own, reading like biblical scholars or other people who were like professionally trained in biblical scholarship, that kind of a thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, there are all these perspectives out there. Like I have my favorite Catholic priest, Richard Rohr. I have my favorite Lutheran pastor, like Nadia Bolz-Weber, like all these amazing Christian thinkers out there that were just a balm to my soul. And I wish now I had found them earlier, but I wasn't in a space where I needed that earlier in my life. And so I'm glad that worked out. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. Was it scary to be honest with yourself about how you felt about certain aspects of your place in the church?
I wouldn't say it was scary. It was, I really felt like this is kind of where God had led me. Like, I know a lot of people sometimes are really afraid, like, oh, is this an approved source? Like, can I read a book by a Catholic priest? Like, that's something we actually hear a lot from people. Like, they're like, I was nervous to listen to you, but then my co-host, her last name is Hinckley. And so they were like, well, they must be safe people. And so that wasn't something I experienced where I was afraid to like read quote unquote outside material. But I understand for a lot of people, like that's a real concern. But for me, it just kind of naturally felt like this was where God was leading me and where my interests kind of took me. So it felt safe. It didn't feel scary.
Has there been more tension in your faith or your religious practice?
There has, only because I feel like, and maybe this sounds familiar to you, you kind of carry the weight of a lot of people. Like once you start speaking publicly, you get the letters, you get the DMs, you get people like crying to you, you know, in public if
At
you
the grocery
have
store.
face to face, like it's really heavy. And so there are certain things that maybe weren't an issue for me before that now I see through like the eyes of a woman who is divorced and in the church. Do you know what I mean? That's not my experience, but now I feel like I'm carrying extra weight because I'm so concerned about their experience within the church too. So yes, Charlie, 100%, it's gotten harder in the church.
Yeah, that resonates with me as well. I don't know if I've ever articulated it like that, but like I do feel like I carry the weight of so many people's stories and their experiences.
Yeah. Does having these conversations with various women impact the way you worship, like on like any given Sunday, like how you feel about interacting with church or general conference or church leaders?
That has changed, but it's more like me just needing to set boundaries with the organization. Like if I'll give you one example, like the word preside is really hard for me. And I went through something like really hard about 10 years ago where I would just start noticing that word every time, you know, I would be in the temple or I would hear it in conference or something. And so I just kind of like had this conversation with God about it. And I was like, it's okay for me to walk out. Not everything is for me. And so like, that's kind of this trigger word for me. If I hear preside, I just like, now's the time to go get a drink out in the hallway at church or something like that. So I think setting boundaries has enabled me to continue to participate in an organization that I do love. And at the same time, I think it's not always healthiest for me to hear every single thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, those were some of the questions I had.
Awesome.
Right.
Might think of more. I think there's a lot of parallels with the last one specifically. you mentioned being able to see through like a divorcee's eyes. And I feel like the more people I talk to and learn about their individual experiences, maybe it was a leading question. I just wanted to see where you went with it. I like what you said. And I think there's a lot of truth there. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, as I'm involved and like maintain activity in church, I view things from like my perspective and others as well. And it's like a more empathetic, it's like a personal relationship with like worship. And also I'm a lot more mindful of how other people might be feeling or interpreting
Mindful.
things. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. You absorb it based on like your experience, but then also being mindful of how it's hard for others.
Yeah.
How could that not affect you as like a caring individual? I think that's it does, it gets really hard sometimes.
So how did you become an ally?
It's interesting.
And how did you become middle-aged?
How did I become middle-aged? That one's easy to answer. I stayed alive, so I just naturally got
We're
older.
very happy about
Well
that.
done.
Yes, I am.
That actually is something to.
I am too.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Really, to get older is a privilege that not everybody has. And so that's what I say to myself when I start looking in the mirror and I'm like, oh, things are changing. I'm like, this is a privilege. This is a privilege that not everyone gets. So I'm
Love
grateful
it.
for that. But the way I became
Remember that, Ben.
When I
Your hair
turned for it,
continues to gray.
it's almost done. It doesn't have much left.
Salt and pepper. It's a little more salt than pepper these days.
Anyway, I'm Anderson Coopering.
There you go. How I became an ally is about 5 or 6 years ago. I kind of felt, and I'll preface this by saying, like, I'm not someone who's gone throughout my life where I'm like, I feel like God is telling me to do this, or I feel like the Spirit is nudging me. I've always wondered that, like, wow, people actually just have these experiences where it's like God tells them to turn left when they were planning to turn right. And that's not me at all. But I started feeling these nudges of, you don't know anything about the LGBTQ community. Maybe you should like start looking around and seeing like what's going on. And the Encircle House had just opened up here in Provo. And so I decided I'm going to volunteer there. That would be a great way to start to educate myself and feed this curiosity that I have. And so I started volunteering there, hearing the stories, of the kids that would participate. It was so wonderful and such an education and such a spirit-filled place to be. And then about a year and a half later, my daughter came out as gay. And so I was like, aha, thank you, God, for gently nudging me. Because most of my life, I feel like God must not be nudging me because he trusts me. And that's, just kind of how my life has gone. And so to have felt this nudging, I was really grateful, because I think I would have said some not so helpful things to my daughter.
It sounds like having your daughter come out to you helped you see God's hand in your life.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It was really cool. It was really this kind of like moment for me where I was like, oh, God does talk to me. Maybe just differently than how some other people.
Yeah, that's really
hear
beautiful.
God.
I'm glad you shared that. I'm curious, what was the demographic of other people volunteering at Encircle back then?
Middle-aged moms.
I knew it.
No.
I knew it. It's funny. We were talking about this question, and people ask this all the time. The moms ask it. The kids ask it.
Really?
Yeah, they're like, "How come the only people who care are like middle-aged moms?" So
Interesting.
let's chat about it. I have a few theories.
I'm totally want to hear the theories.
Let's start with your theory, Charlie.
Well, maybe we should, like, I feel like we need to prove this. Like, we
Yeah.
want evidence-based practices, right? So in preparation for tonight, I looked at the demographics of my Instagram followers, and
Yes.
87% middle-aged moms.
87.
87%. So whatever I'm at, I don't like whatever like 155 times 87% is. That's how many. That's a lot. Like that's like over 100,000 middle-aged moms, and they're the ones who care. And the rest are like,
Or do they usually like you and your dances?
maybe so.
It doesn't.
What's that?
134,000.
So there's at least 134,000 middle-aged mom allies
Yes.
in America.
They might not be allies. They might just be haters who want to see what you're up to.
Those usually don't follow. They just search.
Okay.
But yeah, and then the rest, I presume, like all the guys are like either like husbands or mostly gay men. Anyway, I've always thought it was really fascinating that like the people who gravitate towards education around like faith and sexuality are the moms. Any experiences you've had, Ben, with a plethora of middle-aged moms?
Well, I've had a lot of people plan firesides for me, and I would say 90% of them were middle-aged moms.
Yeah.
Yeah, not always, but I would say for the most part, they're the ones who've gotten me to come speak in their stakes.
Yeah. And they're also wonderful. Really, when I was just first coming out, I was out to very few people, and I didn't have family here yet. It was really my junior year at BYU. I met one middle-aged mom who kind of like took me under her wing and started inviting me over for like Sunday dinners. And then it just turned into this whole network. And for a while, like my lifeline, like physical lifeline, people who were like actually with me,
yeah.
was like these moms and their families who were just like, hey, if you're having a hard day, come over. And I would. And it was really cool. And I was always really impressed. And usually, in my experience, this isn't always true. Like, nothing against the dads. We love dads. We love the guys. But in most cases that I've seen, it's the mom who has a change of heart first, and then the husband follows.
I agree.
So
And it's not always that way.
it's not always that way. But
Yeah, and also I think
there's something special.
yeah, and when it comes to social media, I also think we should point out that I think women are more likely to be on social media.
That is true.
And so it doesn't mean that the dads care less. They just
They
are-
just follow the NFL instead of me.
yeah.
Anyway, just that's some, things I've noticed. Why do you think, Ben? Why do you think it is?
I've got a couple theories as well.
I do too. I wonder if they're the same.
I think that moms often have a special relationship with their kids. They might like talk to their kids about deeper, harder things, like talk about emotions more. It's not always the case, but I think that's the case for many families where the moms really like dig into the kids' feelings and have this tighter relationship. Once again, not always the case. So they might be more aware of what's going on. I also think that if they come from a certain socioeconomic status, they might have more time outside of like I'm sorry, not that moms aren't busy.
Wow.
I need to say so much
Eventually,
better.
I just said
No,
being a stay-at-home mom is not a full-time job.
no, that's not what I'm saying.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah, I'm saying as children grow, and if you've worked if
You're
you're
saying socially, they're typically the primary caretakers in an LDS household.
yes, and therefore they then have more time. No, they have a lot to do. I just going to dig myself farther into a hole. Their time is more flexible, but still busy because they're not working 8 to 5.
Thoughts on that?
I think
As a strong, independent woman, how do you feel about what you just
no,
said?
you know what? It's a stereotype for a reason because it's kind of true. Like a lot of middle-aged moms who are allies are a little bit more financially privileged because they aren't working 3 jobs on the side and taking care of their children, so they have the time to go volunteer at Encircle. So I do think there is definitely some truth to that. I also think being, I follow the traditional LDS path where I stayed at home and my husband is the one that worked, the full-time job. So I just had more proximity to the children. I was there a lot more. I was having those conversations, like you say, about emotions and this and that. And so there's something, I've talked about this because I'm curious too, which is why I submitted the question. Why are so many of the moms the allies? So I've talked to a lot of my girlfriends about this, and I call it like this time machine effect, kind of, where when your kiddo comes out as a mom, you kind of go back, kind of like this is your life kind of a moment where you replay all these tender, beautiful moments that you've had with your baby, where you see their absolute goodness and wholeness. I I didn't use the word perfection, so I use whole instead of perfect, right? Because anyway, I just think I could see that in my daughter, and my friends see that in their own kiddos when they come out. And so you kind of start going, wait a minute, a lot of the things maybe that I heard growing up LDS, they're not panning out here. Like, this isn't a choice, and some of the other stereotypes that at least I grew up hearing, I'm like, oh, this isn't true. And so that just kind of started to make me see things through new eyes, kind of like what we were talking about. Like when you become a podcaster and you start hearing all the heavy stories of people, it weighs on you. And so it started weighing on me, and I started seeing, like, sitting in church, the comments that maybe were somewhat homophobic before sounded horribly homophobic now, because I'm like, you're talking about my baby. How dare you? And so it just kind of starts riling me. It started to rile me up a little bit, where I was like, something has to be done. And as someone who's an extrovert, it was a lot easier for me. I know, and I'm only speaking for myself, but for so many people that are maybe introverted or shy or quiet or maybe brand new in their ward, like they don't want to rock the boat. Whereas I'm like, I've been in my neighborhood 25 years. I don't mind pushing the envelope and, calling people out on saying that's not true. And so for me, at least, things just started landing in a different way. And it just became essential that if I'm going to be in the pews with my fellow Latter-day Saints, I had to show up as myself. And that meant, now being an LGBTQ family, meant that I needed to show up and support the kind of family that we are. Because I think sometimes we think it's like a us, them. And it's like, no. LGBTQ people and their families are in the pews. And I don't think sometimes a lot of people actually realize that until someone like me is willing to raise their hand and go, actually.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate the comment you made about, like, being an extrovert and, like, kind of giving a nod to different personalities. And I just wanted to highlight that there is not a one size fits all to be an empathetic ally.
Absolutely.
And I think, I don't know, I love that you made that point, because the way that you feel like you need to do it is probably the way you should.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like, you don't have to do what somebody else is doing in order to be a valid ally.
And allyship can look like a lot of different things.
It does. Yeah. And my husband is the introverted side of our relationship. And so it's interesting. I just had a conversation with him like a week ago. We were going to church, and I teach youth Sunday school. So I always have like an I'll walk with you rainbow pin on my bag. Or, sometimes I'll pin it on, but I don't always want to like put a hole in my nice church sweater or something. And so it's always on my bag. And so I have said to my husband off and on, I don't know, maybe every 6 months, I'll be like, Paul, do you want to wear a rainbow pin to church today? And his answer was just always no. And I thought, okay, he's not ready. That's okay. So finally, a week and a half ago, I said, hey, hon, I'm just like wondering, you usually turn me down, and that's fine. I just really want to understand, like, how would that make you feel to wear a rainbow pin? And he said, well, I just don't wear jewelry, like, at all. And I was like, oh my gosh, this whole time I'm thinking, oh, he's nervous and he doesn't want people to think this, that, or the other about him, when really he sees it as jewelry, And so that's maybe not for him. And yet he is a professional. He's a partner in his accounting firm. And like 2 years ago, he changed his email signature to say he, him. That's huge to me. Like, I was like, wow, this could like affect your career. You could lose clients over this. And so I'm the extrovert who will like raise my hand in church and say all kinds of things. And he's more the quiet person who'll be like, I'll change my email signature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And those are both totally valid.
Totally valid.
And yet you would be more noticed.
Yes.
With your work than he would.
Yeah.
Before your daughter came out, was it, you might have to dig to answer this a little bit, but I'm curious, did it feel easier to accept gay men than lesbian women?
Ooh. Yes, I think you're right.
Why?
I think there are just more gay men who are visible in the church, such as yourselves, right? It's changing now, but for a long time, I felt like there weren't any voices for women. And so it maybe wasn't so much that I thought so much like I can accept men over women. It was just proximity. Like, I only heard the stories of gay men.
I know for me, when I was planning on who to come out to, I started with women because I felt like they would be able to understand the experience of being attracted to a man. Whereas a man would
Interesting.
be disgusted at being attracted to a man. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And there's
Yeah.
also the fear that if you tell a man,
Then they'll
he-
think that they're attracted to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
And then we've also, I mean, obviously the answer to this is going to be like a ton of variables that we're not really sure, but you know,
Sure.
like for the actual reason that it seems like middle-aged moms seem to be the most vocal allies. But additionally, we've done an episode called "Where Are All the Lesbians?" Like, how come like gay men are out more at church, it seems, and lesbian women aren't? And almost every gay man I've talked to has come out to their mom first. So, and I think maybe, I don't know, I'm curious if some of that is just like that social and relational idea of, oh, maybe my mom will understand this better than my dad, because my dad will be like more disgusted and the mom will be like, oh, I know what it feels like. I don't know.
Or maybe it's like more uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about my own family. Like I came out to my parents at the same time. And my mom didn't really have a big opportunity to be an ally because I came out publicly just shortly before she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and her Alzheimer's was already setting in by then. But my dad has been an enormous ally.
Yeah.
And like maybe 4 or 5 years ago at Christmas, like I drew his name to get him, like to buy him the Christmas present because we draw names. And I said, "What do you want for Christmas?" He said, "I want a rainbow tie." And he wears his rainbow tie to church.
Really?
His jewel-toned rainbow tie.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
Buzz, if you're listening.
Yeah. And then the rainbow socks are on the cover of my book. I didn't own them. My dad already had them, and I just bought a pair for myself. So he already wore rainbow socks. And then my dad goes to Institute, like the YSA Institute, and they every once in a while introduce himself. He's like, "Hi, my name is Buzz Shalati. I'm an ally." He just like introduced himself that way. And so so I think there are a lot of dads doing a lot of things. It just might be that we don't quite see them as much.
Yeah. So within this, it sounds like you're saying that like allyship comes through proximity. And so you feel pretty like your main theory would be that women tend to be more proximate to children, and so that's where the allyship comes from.
Definitely. We didn't end up going, but this was like 7 years ago. We were going to go to the Pride Parade in Seattle when I was there, and my dad was going to bed, and I heard him say to my mom, "I can't believe we're going to a Pride Parade. Who would have ever thought when we got married we'd be going to a Pride Parade with our gay son?" I mean, I'm not going because of parking. I just like, it's a hassle. But they were going to go, and they were like, if I wanted to go, they were going to go with me. But yeah, I think that really is it. I think it's the proximity. And then I think we often view allyship as people posting on social media.
Yeah.
Like that's the most visible thing. I think women just tend to be on social media more.
Yeah. But I do think proximity is like a huge part of it. Like think about, growing up, like how often maybe one of your scout leaders was a mom as opposed to a dad, or like, I just think about all the involvement I've had in church with other
Primary.
people's children. Yeah. Through primary, through activity days, through, I mean, I haven't
like
had
birthday parties and stuff. Like,
Absolutely. And so it's not only just when your kiddo comes out, you're going to be like this like out and proud ally. It's like when your neighbor next door, when their kiddo comes out, because it's like, oh my gosh, she was in my activity days group. I was young women's president about 15 years ago in my ward, and 4 of my young women ended up coming out, not immediately, but by the time, I mean, they're all in their early 30s now. And so I'm just sitting there going, oh my goodness, like I had these amazing relationships and went to girls' camp with, queer young women, and I didn't even know it. And so then I'm just like, and again, like these women are whole and beautiful and lovely, and I want to support them. So it really is proximity. I think that's such a huge component.
Yeah. I had a really interesting experience a few weeks ago. I had to go talk to a professional. I don't want to say what because people might figure out where.
Is it a doctor?
No, it was not a doctor. But I was concerned that the person I was going to talk to, just based on his profession, wouldn't be welcoming to gay people.
It was a lawyer.
So I took off my rainbow
Institute
watch.
teacher?
No, I took out my ring, my watch, and I anyway, it doesn't matter. People can wonder. And so I had to wait for an hour. So I'm talking to this guy for an hour, and he's telling me about how the earth is flat and all these conspiracy theories. And
Wow.
I'm like, okay. And then he asked me what I do, and I was like, oh, I'm starting to work as a therapist. And he's like, well, what kind of therapy do you do? I was like, well, I work primarily with LGBTQ clients. I'd already paid the money, so I didn't need him to trust me anymore. So I could say I was gay. This really isn't the important part of the story. And he was like, he's like, I can't remember who, but it was his brother-in-law was gay, and he had 3 gay mission companions, and he knew all these gay people that he loved, and he just opened up his heart and shared how much he loves gay people and how he wished the world was kinder. So this person who I thought would be less kind to me because I judged him based on his profession ended up being this huge ally because he knew so many people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I think it really is this, who do we know? Who have we talked to? Whose story have we heard?
I completely agree with this. And coming into this, I was thinking about it tonight, and my primary theory was not that.
What was your primary theory?
My primary theory was that based on social and structural components of life, women in the church understand what it feels like to be marginalized or not have certain opportunities based on something they can't control. And they also have these huge questions polygamy and temple ceilings and kind of these eternal unknowns as
Absolutely.
well, whereas men typically don't have that.
Yeah.
And then moving structurally to even just leadership callings and a voice at the table and
Yeah.
difference opinions not feeling valued or heard. I think my theory was that women are sensitive to that and can understand that in their systems.
Totally agree.
And therefore when someone else brings that up, they say, oh, there's more context for, maybe I believe this. Whereas some of the straight men I've talked to have been like, oh, no, that doesn't happen.
Right.
That's not an issue. I've never felt that. And I'm like, well, go figure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. In fact, I was thinking early in our conversation when I was talking about when we started our podcast and things we were nervous to say, at first we didn't want to say the word patriarchy because we were some people could be really turned off by that. But I mean, it's the truth. If you're in a patriarchal organization like our church is, then the privileged people who are the leaders don't have to think about certain things. And so
Or maybe don't have as much context to understand what it's like.
absolutely. Yeah. Context. And so I absolutely agree with you that with women already being marginalized within the church, I think it's that much easier to also understand other marginalized groups.
Yeah, definitely.
Actually, so about a year ago, I was having a conversation with a woman, a middle-aged woman, and she kind of couldn't get it. And I was explaining to her, she's like, why don't you just marry a woman? And I was like, I don't know how to explain it to you. And she's like, you'll never be exalted. And I was like, I don't know how to explain it to you. And she was thinking, and she was like, actually, I don't think I could do polygamy. And back in the day, I wouldn't have been exalted if I didn't do polygamy, according to
Right.
the prophet's teachings. And she was like, I understand. And it was she came to that conclusion on her own. I never would have thought about it,
Wow.
But she just said, I would never judge myself for feeling like I couldn't do polygamy, and I will never judge a gay man ever again for not being able to marry a woman.
Bravo.
And I was like, wow.
That's some real perspective taking and
That's
compassion.
that's
And this
really
was all
amazing.
in one conversation,
Yeah.
in one 20-minute setting or whatever.
Yeah.
That's
she was just
amazing.
thinking about it.
Good job.
And so I guess that's kind of proof for my theory. I mean, there's not a right answer, but I think it's really cool. I was also thinking kind of within the organizational structure of the church, women don't have as much chain of command. Mm-hmm. There's
I know.
there's a there's a hierarchy there. So I feel like naturally women do more grassroots things and gatherings, and Relief Society is a very grassroots organization. It seems it's there's someone in need. What are we going to do? Let's when I was growing up, it was let's get quilts and do a drive. And it's not so structural. It's not so like policy driven. It's more like creative driven and emotionally driven. And so I wonder if that allows, because that's kind of how allyship is, because there's not like a right way to do it. There's not like a rule book for how to be an ally.
Yeah.
That perhaps LDS women are more, prone to just better at doing that.
See a need and fulfill it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Cynthia, as you were talking about, you're like, I've been in my ward for 20 something years and I have the street cred. I can say what I need to now. Like, people know me. So I talked to some people about this question, some guys. And one of the things one of them said was, well, I'm worried if I'm too vocally an ally, then I won't get such and such a calling.
Yep.
And there's this fear that vocal allyship could lead to fewer opportunities, and that was something I hadn't considered. I even talked to a friend who said that he felt like he had been released from his calling because of something he had said, and I have a friend who also said I was told that I was released from my teaching calling because of this thing that I said.
Do you think women get away with more?
I do.
I do too, actually, in a weird way. Like, there's less power, but they don't have as much rigidity around, it seems. What do you think? I'm not a woman, so
I think that's true. I think women are less concerned about like the leadership callings just because there are less leadership callings for women, so it's not always on our radar. I don't know what it's like to be a man, to obviously be like, oh, I could never be elders quorum president if I said this, or a bishop, or
We don't want to do it anyway.
Well,
So
yeah,
much
I mean,
work.
that's another podcast, right? Who would want to do those things? But I know that there is also just as real of a cost for women. Like, I have heard many women who are released from callings by being allies, and so I mean it's there for both. It's there for men and women in the church, and I have to respect that. Like, people maybe they want to keep their influence in certain callings, and they don't want to be released, and so they're more careful, and I respect that that's where they are at that moment, and maybe that'll change, maybe it won't.
I feel like we're trying to find the recipe to become a good ally. Like sugar, spice, and everything nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Like proximity, empathy, and experience depression.
Maybe.
Can I tell a dad story?
Yeah.
So I've been doing therapy for a bit now, and I have a client who's a dad, and I'm not going to tell anything about his story. But I don't get emotional in my sessions. Like, I rarely, like, if a client is crying, I don't usually cry. But this dad, in multiple of our sessions, like talking about his LGBTQ kiddos, like, I've gotten emotional with him because I can just feel how much he loves his kids. And I just, like, for some, maybe like connects me with like my dad and how much like he loves me and supports me. But there's like real power in the love of like dads and moms and parents of all kinds for their kids. And that's something that I have felt acutely.
Yeah. I wonder, and again, just like nodding to blind spots, it's very likely that I view women, when I think about middle-aged moms and like allies and parent allies, I don't think about my parents, weirdly. I think about, but I guess that's just the space I live. Like, my mom lives really far away and my dad's not a member of the church.
Yeah.
And so like contextually, like I haven't seen him in a sacrament meeting for like decades. Right. So it's like, I don't, like, he is a very strong ally. He's very supportive of me, but within a church, like, questions from the closet context, I'm not thinking about my dad.
Yeah.
And when I think about like the mom allies, it's like, my mom is an incredible ally and has done so many good things, but she lives far away. And so I guess I'm just noticing that like during this conversation, I'm thinking about like the women I meet at the events we go to and the people who help with the podcast and things like that.
Yeah. I met a mom just this morning at the gym. Sometimes I get stopped at the gym by moms. They're lovely. And she was telling me about her kiddo who came out a few years ago and all the work she is doing. And I made sure to like say thank you. Like, thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because your teen can't do that yet. Like you need to do those things. And so I try and thank allies for the work that they do because they make things happen there. And there is someone who will not listen to a gay man like me, but will listen to a middle-aged mom.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny. Like, I have a good friend. She's been on your podcast. I won't say her name in case she doesn't want me to, but she is a gay woman, but she says, like, I choose not to wear pants to church, even though that's what she would maybe be more comfortable in, just because she's already a gay woman. And so there's already like one thing, I don't want to say a strike against her, but do you know what I mean? One way she's different. Let's put it that way. Whereas like I started wearing pants to church about 4 years ago, and I can get away with that because I'm a privileged, like, straight woman. And so nobody, I mean, maybe some people do look at me and think, oh, I wonder if she's a gay woman. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I feel like that also has played a role, at least in my allyship, is using my privilege. Like I said, I've been in my stake for 25 years. Like when you show up and, you cook bacon for girls at girls camp, you can get away with saying a little bit more because it's like she shows up, she does the hard work.
Yeah.
And so that allows me to like push the envelope in other ways, like wearing pants to church and, wearing a rainbow pin, or just ways where I spent 25 years building capital and now I'm willing to spend a little bit to help people.
As you were talking about that, I was thinking of my dad. My parents, well, my dad, he still attends the ward building he was baptized in 1972.
That's a lot of capital he's built.
Like he spent his entire church life in this one stake. And and I think when you have that kind of relationship with the people around you, you can do things and say things.
Yeah, I can say things that maybe I wouldn't say if I were brand new in a ward. Just different. I mean, and those are just a couple of ways that I can think of where I've tried to use my privilege for other people.
It kind of makes me sad to like talk about leveraging capital based on things that have nothing to do with the gospel of Christ.
Yes.
Like wearing pants is 100% cultural. Like it has nothing to do with your faith. But it's, I don't know, that's just...
But anything that gets people to maybe think about old things in new ways,
right,
is a good thing.
Yeah,
so.
no, I agree. It just, I just, all the time when I have these conversations, I'm like, what you just said, like reading the scriptures, looking to like Christ for answers. If there was more of that, then allyship would just bloom. Because allyship to me is being Christ-like. It's reaching out. It's lifting up the hands that hang down. It's inconveniencing yourself for the betterment of somebody else. It's taking on other people's pain.
Yeah.
Like that's who Christ is. And I don't know.
Maybe we'll get there.
I hope so.
Yeah. It's interesting sometimes, the story that came to my mind was the story of at the Last Supper, where the woman comes and anoints Christ's feet and then washes his feet with her hair. And that's at the Last Supper, yeah?
Depends on the gospel you read.
Okay,
In some it's the Last Supper, and some it's like a couple weeks before or something.
Okay,
so
great.
Close enough.
Thank you for knowing the scripture, Cynthia. And the apostles are like, what are you doing? And Jesus says, well, she's preparing me for my burial, like anointing me for my burial.
Right.
And they had like missed that was going to happen, but this woman picked up on something.
Yeah. So like the apostles missed it, but this lady was like, I see what's happening.
And then Jesus
Beautiful.
was able to explain based on what she did, what was happening to the whole group. And sometimes because of differences in people, some people know things, others don't.
Sure.
Yeah. Could we each go around and share like an example of faith and allyship from maybe like our own moms and another mom that just comes to mind?
My favorite ally is my own mom, actually, because when my daughter came out, I was talking to my mom and she said, she was crying and she said, I'm just so worried I may have ever said anything that could have made her path harder. And so like my mom got on the phone with my daughter and just said, and Abuelita is what my mom goes by. And so she says, I just want you to know how much your Lita loves you. And if I had ever said anything, I'm telling you right now, I'm sorry. And it was just such this like beautiful moment between my daughter and my mom to see like, wow, my mom, kind of like I was saying before about like the time machine. My mom has seen everything about her life from the moment she came into our home and was just like, I love you and I support you no matter what, always.
Yeah, love that. From my mom, I have lived away from my parents most of my adult life. And so when I came out when I was 23 to my parents, like they were lovely and wonderful, but I didn't get to much opportunity like see my parents interacting with other people. And then after my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I realized she like forgot that I was gay. And so I was like, maybe I'll come out to her a few times just to see what it's like. And I was like nervous. I was like, hey, Mom, did you know that I'm gay? And she's like, you're gay. And I said, yeah, what do you think about that? And she said, well, as long as you're happy and you get to do the things you want to do. And I was like, I am happy. I do get to do the things I want to do. Thank you, Mom. And we had that same conversation 4 or 5 times. Like,
That's so special.
yeah. And she's always just loving and kind. So yeah, that's and if my mom had conversations with other people or like advocated for me at church, like I never got to witness that, but I knew that with me personally, she was like, I just want you to be happy. I trust you.
Yeah.
My mom didn't flinch. Like she didn't even think, there wasn't even like a hesitation when I came out to her. It was really amazing. And actually, at my wedding, she told me this later. I didn't know this happened. And I don't know how she told me this in a way that was like, it was information. It wasn't because she wanted to like be praised. She didn't even think it was a praiseworthy thing that she did. But, one of those other moms that I referred to earlier that had kind of like invited me over and taken me under wing back when I needed it, when I wasn't around any family, was at my wedding, and her son had died by suicide a few years ago. Probably, I don't know how long it's been, but they'd never met in person. But my mom recognized her from pictures or Facebook or whatever. And so right before the ceremony started, she walked up to her and said, just like, hey, thank you for taking care of my son. It meant so much to me. It was hard to be so far from him. And she said, I want to like recognize that I want to tell you that I'm holding a place for your son, because I know this might be kind of hard to sit through and see my son get something that your son didn't get to because he didn't make it, it was just tragedy struck, And I was like, Mom, like, how did you think to do that? Like with everything that was happening that day and everything that was moving and all the parts and all the chaos, like she saw this woman and just wanted to say, hey, as I'm happy for my son, I am mourning your son.
Beautiful.
And I was just like, wow, that's moms right there. That is the power of mothers. So I love you, Mom.
That was beautiful.
Also, another example today, someone told my husband on basically to go die in the Instagram comments. And this lady, a middle-aged mom that follows me, saw the comment, and she commented and found his mom and tagged her and said, like, at this kid's mom was like, I just wanted to let you know what your son's been up to online.
Oh my gosh.
She's like, as a mother of 4, I would want to know if my kid was saying anything like this.
Wow.
And like within 30 I just happened to be on my phone. I saw it come in, and within 30 seconds, the kid had deleted his comment.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So Moms
my
Unite
goodness.
is funny.
That's a good story.
Anyway,
Wow.
All right. And we're going to share a story of a mom now?
I guess I kind of did both.
Okay.
But
Well, I've got a story.
okay.
In my head, I've been thinking about literally dozens of moms I could talk about, like people here in Utah and Arizona and California, like so many moms who are doing so many great things. But the one
What
that
about in Florida
in Florida too,
or Vancouver?
there are yes, definitely. But the story that comes to mind is the one that's most recent, because after my date this week, my friend Tiffany said that, who was a middle-aged mom, she told me to call her after. I'd like to tell her about my date. So right after, she was the first person I called, and I told her all about it, and she asked questions, and I was just like so honored that I could have someone when I couldn't talk to my own mom that I could like talk to who I knew would be like just want to hear about it and be happy. Like to me, that's allyship, like being present with someone. And I'm talking about my dad now too. But at the Gather conference, I saw my dad go up to people and say, "Tell me your story," and then people would talk for a long time and tell him their story. And at first I was like, oh my gosh, Dad, you're going to hear so much trauma. You have to stop asking people. Like you were not prepared for this. But he kept doing it. And now he just does it all the time. Like, tell me your story. And I talked to so many people who got to talk to my dad who were just like so grateful. And like, to me, that is allyship. You know, saying like sitting with someone or standing in a hallway with them and saying, tell me your story, and then listening.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. Who's a good example of a middle-aged mom to you, Cynthia?
My friend Susie Augenstein. you guys probably know a little bit about Susie. She has what I guess we would say no skin in the game. Like, she doesn't have a gay kiddo, but she had a group in her home for years. I think she still does it here and there, where they play games and have treats. And I just think, wow, that is just so amazing to me to see people that just see a need and they're like, I can do it. I can fill this need and help other children of God.
Love that.
I feel like I already shared mine with the mom in the comments. I have 1,000, but I had two thoughts. I'm wondering for the person who's listening who like doesn't have a supportive mom.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's also women in my life who have basically like shut me out because they're like, I don't know why, for whatever reasons. Like, what advice would you give to someone who's like listening to this is really painful because their mom or dad like didn't, like, both Ben, me and you, both of our parents accepted us like quickly and have been in it and have been like good allies for us.
Yeah. When I moved to Tucson, I had been living in Washington for a year, and so every Sunday I went to my parents' house for Sunday dinner, and it was awesome. Like, the whole family was there. And when I moved to Tucson, I knew no one in the whole city. And the prayer I prayed the most, like getting ready to go, was that God would send me a family that I could have Sunday dinner with. And He did, like my first Sunday. And the Minches, they became my family, and they still are. And I think when we are away from our family for whatever reason, we can pray that God will send us family. And in my case, like, He answered that prayer that I needed so much, like, immediately. And so if someone is feeling like they need the love of a dad or a mom or a sibling, I would say pray for that and trust that God will give that to you.
Advice? Do I have advice? I don't know. That's a hard one. I love the idea of praying and just explaining to God what you need. I also think look for the helpers, right? If you see someone with a rainbow pin on their bag at church, I can't tell you how many times I've had like youth in my neighborhood reach out to me because I fly a pride flag or I have the pin or whatever. And so I think look for the people that are safe. We usually try to signal to people that we're a safe person. And trust me, like, all of us middle-aged moms, we love it. We love it when the kiddos say, can you help me in this? Or can you be my mom? Because I'm away from home or whatever. Like, we just eat it up.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who feels like they can't play this role for whatever reason? Like, they can't, quote unquote, wear pants to church.
Like the mom who wants to be an ally.
The mom who wants to ally but feels like she's stuck for any reason.
I think there's always something you can do behind the scenes. So whether it's just like Ben was saying, his dad just saying, tell me your story. Like, I just think there are so many different ways that are private, that are one-on-one. And maybe the person maybe that's just not their personality, that they'll ever, wear the pin or fly the flag or, have a podcast or whatever. But I just think there are so many ways for everybody to fill a need at whatever they're comfortable with in that moment. And I do think those one-on-one conversations are probably the most healing, actually, to have someone hear your story.
And I think if someone wants to reach out and help and do something more, like if you pray and ask God, like, how can I serve your children?
The opportunities will come up very quickly.
Always.
Yeah, of course.
Then you're going to like push people away from doing that. They're like, oh, I'm busy. I'm not going to say that prayer yet.
Yeah.
Well, they don't have to.
Be careful what you pray for.
Yeah.
It's true.
It's like praying for patience.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting stuck in traffic. Well, if you're a mom listener,
Or a dad listener.
but especially this one's for the moms, then we'll do another one about the dads.
Okay.
We love you too, Buzz. We love you. Thanks for being allies. I feel like there's so many people who have like emulated Christ to me through proximity and empathy and just working to understand.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for being on, Cynthia. We appreciate you
My
and your work.
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. If you have enjoyed this or other episodes, please consider leaving a review, following us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at Questions from the Closet, or sharing this podcast with someone you love. And as always, please remember that we do not represent the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or Brigham Young University. We're not trying to be prescriptive or tell anyone what to think or what to do.
You heard 3 perspectives, and there are many, many more.
We encourage you to listen to other voices and hear a wide variety of experiences. If you would like to submit a question or share a comment about today's episode, you can email us at questionsfromthecloset@gmail.com.
Until next time.